Assalamu alaikum. Dear students, in continuation with our previous lecture from chapter Support and Movement, today we will discuss bones and cartilages. Remember, we have discussed the types of skeleton in our previous lecture, that was exoskeleton, endoskeleton and hydrostatic skeleton. In this lecture, we will discuss what is endoskeleton made up of and how it works. The example of endoskeleton was vertebrates, so we will discuss here in detail. Endoskeleton of vertebrates is made up of connective tissues known as bones and cartilages. Bones are basically made up of cells that are called as osteocytes, right? The bone cells are known as osteocytes. Why our bones are hard? You have noticed that our bones are very hard. This is because of the presence of calcium phosphate, and the process by which the crystals of calcium phosphate are deposited on the bone is known as ossification or calcification. This process occurs or takes place in presence of vitamin D. Always remember that your body needs vitamin D in sufficient amount to absorb calcium. Whatever amount of calcium you are taking in your diet, you have to take vitamin D, or your body also requires vitamin D, so that that calcium could be absorbed into your body and deposited on the bones to make them stronger. In addition to calcium and vitamin D, mineral salts and proteins are also responsible for the hardness of the bones. Here you can see the diagram. This is the real diagram of a bone. You can see the outer layer, that is the harder one, the harder outer layer. Then there is spongy structure in this bone, and the bone marrow, the soft connective tissues, the living cells, because of which the bones grows as our body grows. Cartilage. Cells of cartilages called as chondrocytes. The cells of the bones were osteocytes. Remember that. The cells of the bones are called as osteocytes, while the cells of the cartilage is called as chondrocytes. Chondrocytes secrete gel-like mixture. This gel-like mixture is made up of protein and polysaccharides. The main protein which is secreted in this mixture is collagen. Collagen gives cartilage strength and elasticity. The cartilages are very elastic as compared to bones, and this elasticity comes because of the presence of collagen. Cartilages are found at surfaces of joints. We will discuss it in detail when we discuss joints. It also forms stiff structures, a little bit harder structure. The example of these structures are external ear and tip of our nose. Both these structures are soft structures. You have noticed that the fishes that we eat at our home, they have an endoskeleton made up of bones. We remove that bones while we eat them. But there are certain fishes that don't have the endoskeleton made up of bone. Instead of that, they have endoskeleton which is consists of cartilages only. That's why these fishes are called as cartilaginous fishes. The example of the cartilaginous fishes is sharks and skates. During the development, the embryo also have the endoskeleton which is made up of cartilages only. In further development, these cartilages are replaced by bones. Joints. The point at which bones connect each other are called as joints. Whenever two bones are present, they will be connected to each other by the help of joints, and they will also have cartilage on it. Without joints, movement is not possible. If we would have a skeleton made up of a single bone, it would be much stronger, but we could not have moved because of the single bone structure. For our movement, the joints are very important. which allows us to move our arms, our legs, even our neck, right? Types of joints. There are three main types of joints, that is freely movable joints, partially movable joints, and fixed joints. Fixed joints are also known as immovable joints. As their name shows, freely movable joints allows movement of that particular bone or part of our body very freely in almost all directions. Partially movable joints allows the movement, a very little bit of movement, and fixed joint or immovable joints don't allow any kind of movement. We will discuss freely movable joints by the help of the example. The first example of freely movable joint is ball and socket joint. In this joint, the head of the longer bone, that could be the thigh bone, femur, or the humerus, the your upper arm bone, it has the head just like a ball, and it fits in the socket or cup-like structure of the girdle. In hip joint, it will be pelvic girdle, and in shoulder joint, it would be pectoral girdle, right? This type of joint basically allows us a great deal of movement in almost all direction. You can easily move your arm in circular direction. You can easily move your leg in circular direction in almost all directions. You can move your arm parallel, your leg parallel to your body. You can move it in forward, in back direction, right? The example of the ball and socket joint is shoulder joint and hip joint. Then hinge joint. The example of hinge joint is your elbow joint and knee joint. This joint basically enable us to move our limb, forearm and the leg below knee. You can bend your knee because of the presence of this joint. We can bend our forearm very easily like this in back and forth direction because of this joint. It is very similar to the way a door swings at a hinge. You have noticed that your doors are attached to the wall by the help of hinge, and when we open and close it, it swings on the this hinge. Similarly, our arm is just like moving or swinging on that hinge joint. In addition to hinge joint, our elbow also have pivot joint. This pivot joint enable us to rotate palm of the hand. This joint is present only in elbow and skull. It is not present in the knee joint. That's why you cannot move your foot upside down, but you can move your hand upside down very easily. This is because the presence of the pivot joint. In skull, the skull is connected to the spine. The skull is connected to the spine here by the help of this pivot joint, which allows us to move our head in sideway direction. We can move our head on the right side, and we can move our head on the left side. Then sliding joints. These joints are present when the bones are meeting at ankle or wrist. Your wrist and ankle bones are basically connected by the sliding joints, and because of as its name shows, it allows the bones present in ankle or wrist to slide over each other. That could allow a movement in many directions, right? We can twist or we can rotate our wrist and our ankle very easily in circular direction because of the sliding joint present in wrist and ankle. Then gliding joints. The vertebrae present in our vertebral column or backbone are linked by gliding joints. It is present between two vertebrae, right? The gliding joint is present in between every vertebrae, and this allows the backbone to move back and forth. We can bend very easily because of the presence of the gliding joint between the vertebrae, and it makes our backbone flexible. Now, partially movable joints and fixed joint or immovable joints. Partially movable joints allows very little movement. This type of joint attaches ribs to the vertebrae, and when we breathe, it allows the ribs to move up and down, right? Fixed joints are also known as immovable joints. Why? Because they don't allow bones to move. This type of joints are present in our skull. They connect the bones of the skull to form a case which protects our brain. This is the internal structure of the hinge joint, which is showing the parts of this joint and how they work. We will discuss it here. First, you will notice there are two bones. Hinge joint, the example of the hinge joint was your knee joint and your elbow joint, right? If this is your knee joint, then the upper bone would be the femur, the thigh bone, and the lower will be tibiofibula. If this you are considering it as your elbow joint, then this is the humerus and this is the radioulna, right? Basically, a hinge joint is consists of these four important parts. The first one is ligaments. What are ligaments? Ligaments are tough connective tissues which held this joint together because of this strong fiber made up of connective tissue. You can see this slightly reddish layer. This reddish layer is basically ligaments which are holding this bone together, keep it intact, right? Then cartilage. The presence of cartilage, which is the slippery layer present right here on this bone and on this bone as well. These two cartilages are present wherever the joint, the bones are meeting at a joint or at a point. There will be always cartilage to support them so that the bones rub, when the bones rub together, they don't get damaged, right? Between this joint there is a fluid which is known as synovial fluid. This fluid helps the joint move smoothly. You can see this purple area, slightly purple area. This is the synovial fluid which runs between these two bones and allow us to move very smoothly. And to keep this fluid intact, there is synovial membrane, this layer and this layer. This is the synovial membrane, and this membrane stops the synovial fluid from draining away. Hope you will understand this structure. This is very important diagram. So try to understand and remember this labeling with this description as well, right? You have to draw it in your home task as well.